and welcome to this week's episode of the Uncovery Podcast. My name is Maddie, and I'm recovering from anorexia, and I talk about it on this podcast. And today is a little bite. What am I doing? I've got a homemade pumpkin spice latte with soy milk, because the latest discussion with my dietitian is that I'm going to stop buying some of the lower calorie, safer milks altogether. And even though, I sort of change it up and I have this and that, and I feel like I, make good recovery choices most of the time, just exclusively focusing on the ones that are more nutrient dense is a direction that I am willing to go. So we have soy milk almost exclusively now, and it's delicious. Now, I had posted on my story this week a little video of me putting whipped cream on the top of my pumpkin spice latte one morning. I don't think I have ever had a story that I posted on Instagram be so liked and popular. Everybody was really here for it. And that was really nice. Apparently everybody is very excited about me, expanding my horizons. I also had an Alpha-Getty incident, and these are the things that we have to do. You just have to keep challenging stuff, and you just have to keep integrating random stuff into your diet that scares the shit out of you because you need to prove to yourself that you can. And that's how it loses its power. Anyways, the reason that I'm doing this episode today is because the news cycle will forget about this shortly. I want to make sure that I, weigh in on these very important topics before it leaves our minds. Now, if you're lucky, none of this will actually have crossed your desk or your computer screen or your phone screen. But in case it has, this podcast is now just evolving into me opining about things that I think are of importance. But if you told me that, Kim Kardashian would come up on Uncovery, I would not have believed you. Now, I want to say that I'm not an expert on celebrity culture, celebrity news. I don't have a very good idea of all the goings on, but I do know enough that there's actually history between the two people in question in this episode. They're connected by a very certain Kanye West, but we're not even going to touch that one. We're not going to touch that one. That is outside the scope of Uncovery. We're going to stay in our lane a little bit. But so today's different stories are separate for both Kim and Taylor. So it's not a connected story. But I do follow, although not celebrity culture, I do follow all these sort of, recovery accounts and people that talk about different diet culture topics. And so that's kind of how I came across these things. Let's talk about the Taylor first. Let's talk about the Taylor Swift thing first. She recently came out with an album, and my algorithm seems to think that I'm a Swiftie, and I've been a fan of a lot of her music. I could sort of take or leave some of her sort of like Easter egg tactics. I find them a little bit exhausting, but she's a marketing genius, right? That's celebrity. She's getting your attention, however it is. But she came out with a song that kind of dives deep into all of her own insecurities or the things that she tells herself. And it's called Antihero. And she made a music video for this song. And she has, two characters, which are both played by herself, probably the real her, and then what I would call her own itty bitty shitty committee, right? This sort of evil, mean voice that's in her head. And at one point in the video, she steps on a scale and she looks down and it says fat. And the internet had a very big problem with this, or at least a certain corner of the internet had a very big problem with this, sort of recovery focused or body positivity type accounts. A lot of people kind of got up in arms because describing yourself as fat or thinking of yourself as fat as a negative or as an insecurity implies that you think that fat people are bad or that you are fat phobic. So I understand. I get that. I get the response. I get that people in larger bodies seeing somebody look at themselves as fat and feeling badly about it might cause somebody to feel, oh, well, then what do they think of me? They're obviously fat phobic and they don't like me as much. I have a bit of an issue with this entire line of thinking, namely because how one person feels about their body, and knowing that Taylor Swift has suggested and spoken about her own struggles with her body and eating disorders and disordered eating, she references her own experience, and that's how she's felt in the past. She's brought it out in her art. She's been focused on her body before and eating and restricting and things like that. But just because she thinks that about herself, or because we as people that have eating disorders think these things about ourselves, and guess what? There are a lot of us that can look back on our experiences and relate to this. It doesn't mean that we're fat phobic. It's not actually about being fat. It's not actually about the weight. Like, that's the point. That's what an eating disorder is this misconception internally about the way that we look at ourselves and the way that we look at quote unquote being fat. So it doesn't mean that people that have eating disorders go around judging people that are in larger bodies. Does that make sense? Like, me looking at me has nothing to do with the way that I look at other people. It just doesn't. That's a farce. And to sort of put that on people, or to assume that that's what Taylor Swift is doing, I just think is off the mark. I really don't like the line of logic. I don't think that it's helpful. I think there's a way to be sensitive about the way that we talk about these things and be realistic about the fact that this is a very individual experience and a very individual journey for anybody that sort of suffers through disordered eating or eating disorders. But the internet had a big problem with this, or at least a big part of it did, and kind of called Taylor Swift out to change it or address it, or, suggested things that she should have said instead, or ways that she should have done it differently. And I think it's a little bit unfair because, again, it is her experience. And, I think there's a way that maybe she could have done it where it didn't hit it so on the nose. Like, it was a little bit of a trope, right? Like, you stand on a scale, it says fat, like, we've seen that. It's not super creative, but that's okay. No one with narcissistic personality disorder is demanding that she remove the word covert narcissism from her song, right? Like, being professionally offended by the things that you see does not make you progressive. So I understand that there's people might feel a way about it, but I also don't think that it's her responsibility to bubble wrap people for their own experiences. Not to mention, of course, that the media has been commenting on Taylor Swift's body for years, for her entire life in the public eye. And so it's kind of awful as the media to be like, oh, well, we can talk about your body, but as soon as you talk about it and how you feel about it, now you're fat phobic, and now we're going to ask you to change it. I think it's weird, and I think it's the wrong way to go about this, because she can't win. She can't win. So if this is triggering, I think that's an individual responsibility. We can talk about that. Where is that trigger coming from? How can we cope healthfully with it without bubble wrapping our world? Because that's not how the world works, And what happened was, if you go back and watch the music video now, she's just quietly taken out that clip. She hasn't actually addressed it head on or say like, hey, I changed this or anything about that. She just kind of quietly took it out. And, shutting down the conversation or just deleting things, or I don't know that that's entirely helpful. Like, let's talk about why we're afraid of being fat. Let's talk about the way that our minds view ourselves. It makes a statement about your own insecurity. And I just think that fat phobic is a heavy charge to lay against somebody with an eating disorder, because that's what an eating disorder often is and entails. So, lucky for her, she's uncancelable in these things. People will sort of just gently call her in. Like, she has such a big fan base that it doesn't really matter what she does. I think a lot of other people, if they had done something similar, would have been raked across the coals in a big way. But yeah. Okay. The other thing that I saw was this photo of Kim Kardashian that has been going around. And I think that she was on a late night show. I am never up late enough to watch a late night show, so I wasn't watching it live, but I saw a photo of it later, and apparently it looks like she's had her breast implants removed, and potentially her, I guess maybe it's like a butt implant or a Brazilian butt lift. I actually don't know very much about what that entails, but this is what was being kind of commented on. So it's hypothesized that this has to do with sort of an emerging new body trend going back to, the 90s and early aughts, this heroin chic look where everybody has to be a stick. And now she's just redefined what the trend of the female body should be now. Because, in the last however many years, we've been idolizing a shape that is like Kim Kardashian, this like small waist, big butt, sort of this very like curvy, voluptuous, but still slim figure. And what that has meant is that Kim Kardashian and the rest of her family, and indeed a lot of other kind of influencers, can sell all kinds of things like skinny teas and workouts and surgeries. And they're making so much money on having people idolize and emulate their look. But now she's gone and changed out her body, and she's reset a new trend for people to emulate. Like, this woman is not well, I don't think, right? Somebody who's focused this much on their body for their entire existence, that is constantly under this kind of scrutiny, this is not doing good things to her brain. This is not somebody we want to idolize. I can guarantee her mental health is not good. Even if you think about the things that she's likely gone through with, other personal things in her life and her family, I have no doubt that this woman struggles very deeply with insecurity about her body, and she will also take your money by making you feel bad about yourself, right? That entire family. We have to stop doing this. We have to stop looking at celebrities for how our bodies are supposed to be, because there's nothing natural about that body. You can't just go to a surgeon as a normal person and be like, I'd like this body now. Thank you very much. Take my millions of dollars. It's super irresponsible. But it's also irresponsible of us to continue to perpetuate this idolization of these bodies and of these people. I'm not actually demanding that Kim be a better role model, though I wish that she would. That would be great. But I don't actually demand that people make us comfortable by having their bodies be normal or by stopping all their diet culture. She can do as she pleases. And I think that she's very distressed and a very unwell lady. But it is up to you and up to us whether we give into this. It's up to me whether I give into this trope about body trend. We're going back to this like skinny body trend. It's up to me whether or not I let that fuck with my head, or whether I keep watching that on repeat and saying, oh man, I wish that I was in on this. So relatedly, there was an idiotic New York Post article about this body trend of heroin chic being back in. Yawn. And I'm of two minds in this whole discussion, because so much of my mantra these days is stay in your own lane, right? Like, recovery requires that I just see things and decide not to engage with them on an internal level that impacts my mind, my heart, to keep me in the recovery game. I have to think about, what is that going to cost me to engage in, to idolize, or to even acknowledge something that bizarre and inane? What's that going to cost me? It's going to cost me my whole damn life to slip back there. So the stay in my lane almost makes me just want to not even give any more oxygen to these things. I was a little bit reticent to even record this because there's a part of me that's like, if we ignore it, it will go away. But pointing out that we need to ignore it feels important somehow. So anyways, how about this? How about bodies are not trends? There is no such thing as a trending body. We've all seen things that were like, the women's bodies through the decades. What shape of a woman was being deemed the most attractive? But real bodies don't have trends. Real people's bodies don't go with these trends. Our bodies are just our bodies. So if we stop treating bodies like trends and just start accepting that there is a really diverse range of the shapes and sizes of people, that's how we got to get out of this. We got to get out of this. Like, this body is it's not fashion. You're a U size, and that's it. So those are my thoughts on the Taylor Swift, the Kim Kardashian, and the New York Post. I don't know. I'm never sure if these are controversial opinions or if this is really straightforward, because it feels straightforward to me. Like, I can hold these truths at the same time, that we can want better from people that have a massive audience, but we also really have to take responsibility for what we do with that image. We have to take responsibility and choose to ignore the nonsense. This, I think, is my thesis here. I should start a podcast called Two Things Can Be True. We can be outraged at the commodification and unfair demands on women's bodies and the way that we look, specifically from media, and maybe those who are less informed about how harmful these narratives can be. as an aside, I generally don't think that anyone of quality that you have in your life buys into this or likes you less because of your U-size body. If anything, that's a very nice little filter to get rid of anyone in your life that's that superficial. But we can be outraged by it generally and rally against it. And we can choose not to fall into it or to take it on board. If other people want to stay in diet culture and body fixation, go for it, dude. It's a waste of your life, and it's going to waste your time to fight so hard about it. But honestly, it's our own responsibility to disengage from the chatter. The less we click, the less we feed it. Pun intended. The less we watch it, the less we feed it. Vote with your attention, vote with your dollars, get out in the world, touch grass, and live. Live without it. We can choose to opt out of this nonsense. So that's my little piece on the current goings on in the diet culture prevailing narrative in some of the news stuff this week. But let me know what you think. I'm totally open to all kinds of different opinions. I'm trying to, I think, figure out at the end of the day, what's actually going to get us the furthest? What's actually going to help us make the most progress in getting away from this stuff? And to me, it doesn't seem like this polarized hyperfixation on outrage. I think there's more that we can do that has to do with staying with ourselves, doing the right thing for ourselves, because we're of no hope to anybody if we're just on Twitter being angry. I'm not helping anybody by railing on about this. I can actually go out in the world and make change. I can embody the change that I want to see. Maybe that ripple starts smaller. I don't know, but it feels like it might be more impactful that way. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you on the next episode.